You're good.
Okay. Hello, Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us for Astrophotography 101 with Ryan. I will introduce Ryan Andreasen. He's been a huge asset to us at Antelope Island State Park and our whole community fighting for dark skies. We've recently received our dedication as a dark sky park by the International Dark Sky Association, and he was a huge part in helping us get that and keep it and doing these programs for us like this to help educate our community. So very, very grateful to Ryan and all of his work. I am very new to all of this technology stuff, so bear with me as I as I get through this. Ryan is this guy down here,
Hello.
um, and he's going to be teaching us some very simple things that all of us can do. Anybody that has a camera can take amazing photography of the night sky. I know years ago I would go out and gaze at the amazing, brilliant night sky and think, man, I wish I could take its picture. It's so beautiful. I wish I could capture that. Well, we can, and it's pretty simple. And Ryan's going to show us how.
All right. And hopefully everybody can hear me. Please, on your comments, Trish is going to watch the comments. And I have two cameras going on right now. So I think this is going to be the live camera. And so hopefully I don't wander. And and this is really new to me too. So we're trying to figure out this software. We use OBS to do this whole thing. So let me transition over to my presentation, and I'll just have myself onto the side as Trish can answer. And if you can't hear us, please tell us so we're not just talking into nothingness. Um, so again, thank you so much for having me, Trish, and Antelope Island. I'm going to kind of go into just a little bit of my background, uh, and it'll be in part of the slides. And there was a day that I came out to Antelope Island and was invited to a basically the class that I'm teaching right now. It was put on by Duke from the Hansen Planetarium or the Clark Planetarium at the time, and I went there just to watch. I wasn't a photographer. I had a camera, but I didn't really know what to do, and I was amazed at the pictures that he was taking. And I just kind of took a couple notes and went out after the class on the island, and I took a snapshot, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing by using those different settings that he just kind of told me. So it really kind of hooked me. There's a little bit more to the story about how I kind of got involved with Antelope Island, and as well, um, Wendy, uh, the park assistant manager, that she was just certified at Dark Sky Park, and I'll kind of go back into that. So let me bring up the full presentation. So it's just uh, the full presentation here, and we'll just kind of go right into it. So I can have plenty of time to talk about questions and talk about some other stuff. So I apologize by using slides. I don't like to use it because it's kind of like my little notes, and so hopefully I can talk my way through this. And I really like to interact, and so this is a little bit new to me, and usually we do this out at the island. So let me grab my little clicker here. So how did I get here? Here's my house on the left. We lived in just Layton, and they started putting in, it's a new neighborhood, and they started putting in some street lights. And the street light that they installed was right in my backyard, and my girls really like to go out and watch the meteor showers when it would be on the news and whatnot. I wasn't really. I mean, I like to go out there, but it didn't really spark me for some odd reason. I think it was because I hadn't touched the sky yet, and I'm going to talk about that a lot, about touching the sky and touching it for yourself and how important that is, and that'll be kind of the light bulb that goes off. Um, and so uh, this lamp that was put out kind of obliterated our ability to look outside and or at least look up at the night sky, because there was so much glare and it just illuminated. It was so hard to see, and so I kind of discovered that this might be a problem, and started doing some research and found the International Dark Sky Association down in Tucson. They kind of referred me over to Antelope Island because they said, hey, they just certified as a dark sky park, and I had no clue what that was. And so I contacted Wendy, and the rest is history. I am now passionate about this, and uh, really just love going out and looking at the stars, and also helping others touch the sky as well. So I had to get the message out. What is light pollution? Because I didn't know what it was. So when I heard about it, and so I had to get educated on what light pollution was. And as we go through the Dark Sky Week, we're going to have different classes that's going to talk about light pollution. I'm not going to go into it too much because we want to know how to touch the sky with your camera. So I formed a kind of just a Facebook page, and I called it Dark Sky Lane because that's where I lived. And it kind of went for a couple years, and I talked about light pollution, the problems and the benefits and whatnot. And it's now morphed into I don't have a slide on it, but I just barely went live with it, Night Sky Science, because we kind of figured out that it wasn't just Leighton that was having the issue. Casey Grimley, he's a pretty famous, well, I call him famous because I really look up to uh, his work out there. He's a local photographer, very, very good. I would follow him if you will. I wish I had the link to his. I could probably get that to you later. But he volunteered to take this photo for me because he liked to do the night sky from time to time, and he was a little bit concerned about the light pollution, and so I think this picture really hits it. And the cities are that's kind of looking a little bit farther north where those cities just don't match as well as what the picture depicts, but it kind of gives the idea of how this is going how uh, it affects you. So I decided, well, I've got to go to social media. So I started posting and posting and posting, and I needed to learn how to become a photographer. And so, yeah, I was out on the island trying to hone my skills, and this young lady went up to, I guess, hone her skills, and uh, I didn't know what to think. Luckily, nothing happened, and that little bison stood his ground and just hung out there. Luckily, and she finally left after she got her picture. But uh, what we really need to find out, and we're going to go really into the basics of what a camera is, and I kind of want to talk about uh, not really as a photographer, but more as an understanding. This will be kind of more of a science project in a way on how the light in the camera really works, because we're going to be dealing with some very, very low light. So really, the camera, all it is a reverse engineering of the eyeball. And so I could only guess on how they took this eyeball apart to figure out how this all worked. But if you look at a camera, it looks almost identical. You have the light that comes through a little lens. It projects that image back onto the back of the retina where there are sensors, if you will, that talk about or basically send signals to the brain, or in the camera, it's a computer. So if we look at the camera as just like the eye, it's identical, which is very, very interesting on how they did that. There's actually two different types of uh, I call it two different types of astrophotography. There's the Milky Way Scapes that you probably see around, and which involve a foreground, put in a place, and then sometimes the Milky Way or stars of formation in the background. I usually use this core of the Milky Way here that I shot on Buffalo Point last year. Um, that's pretty prominent that a lot of people put in their pictures, and it's very, very hard or very, very easy to capture. On the other hand, there's also astrophotography, which I call deep sky imaging, which you're actually using a tracking device. So if you look behind me, let me transition back to me, if I can find me here. Let's see. Let me just transition to Trish and I I'm going to actually make myself bigger in the, we'll go right here. But in the background here, you can kind of see a couple mounts that I have. Let me get out of my focus ring. I have a couple mounts here. So astrophotography involves using tracking mounts that we're actually going to polar align or point the tracking mounts up to the axis of the rotation of the Earth. And Polaris just so happens to be, which is the North Star, just so happens to be very, very close to the actual rotation point or axis. And once you get that established, then you can actually follow the night sky because it's moving, and that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to touch a moving target, and which is very, very difficult as we go into this class to do with the specific sensors that we have in the cameras. I mean, I'm sure here in about 10 years we may not even have to have the trackers because they're going to be so sensitive. So let me go back into the presentation again. So the astrophotography portion, the deep sky stuff, we're going to talk about on Thursday. So I want to kind of dig deep on that on Thursday and talk about the equatorial mounts and all that good stuff. So photography, a lot of people think it's very, very hard, and I did too. But if you really look at it, it's really just a juggle of the ISO or what they call the sensitivity, and later I've learned the ISO is really just an amplification of the light that's coming in. That really doesn't change. You're just kind of amping it up or turning up the volume if you were listening to a stereo. And as we learn a little bit farther into the slides, when we crank up that ISO, turn it up, you get distortion like you would in a stereo. If you crank that all the way up, you have a teenage son that just cranks that stereo up, and all you can hear is this whoa, whoa. You really don't hear anything. You just wonder, you have it way too loud because you get this distortion. You're not even hearing anything. That's kind of the same with the ISO. So we're going to set that aside for just a second. There's Aperture, which is the iris of the lens. And so think of that as your pupil. So as you're dilating your eyes, you're letting in more light. But there's some consequences to dilating that pupil or bringing out that aperture, making it very, very large. And we'll look into that as well. And then also the last thing that we can juggle around in photography is the exposure. And so, and that's the time that we actually open up basically a curtain to the stage of the sensor in the back of the camera. The longer we keep that open, the longer photons or light particles are going to hit that sensor and excite it and send a signal to the computer to say, oh, I see light, and it's going to send that signal. So ISO, let's go back and talk a little bit more about ISO. ISO stands for International Standards Organization, and what that is when film came out, and each film had a different speed, and so you just really can relate that as to sensitivity. So they had to have some standards of, what is 1,000 speed film would expose X amount of light in X amount of time as you expose. And so they had to come up with that standard. Then we have I used to put in the sensitivity because I think people have a misconception of when they crank up the ISO that they're just they can keep increasing, but really, if you shot at an ISO of say 100 in your camera, that's the lowest sensitivity, if you will, you're still capturing that data. It's just not amplified as much as if you had it at that 6400 ISO. So that's why I like to use the word amplification and think about that as that cranking that stereo volume right up. And also people call it the gain of your sensor, the sensitivity. So just some terms. So the higher the number that you have on your ISO, the more sensitive or more that volume is going to be turned up. So now what we're talking about here is, I kind of have to back up a little bit, is about we're talking manual settings, and that's always the scary part for a lot of people. A lot of people shoot in their auto settings, and believe it or not, if I look at my camera, I don't even know if I know where the auto settings are, which is really cool. I mean, if you can shoot in this manner, you will be a significantly better photographer for sure if you can understand these three areas. So the next one, so the problems with the noise, or problems with the ISO, as we crank up that volume, you're going to get what we call as noise. So if you look at, and temperature actually affects your sensor too. If it gets too hot, it's going to start exciting those sensors and start giving randomness in the noise. So if you randomness in your image, and so if you look at an ISO of 200 there on the left, at 38 degrees C, which is pretty hot, at least ambient temperature, you get very little noise. But as you crank up the volume, you start to see this graininess. Well, sometimes that mimics stars, and that's what's really tough about astrophotography is you can't just crank it up, because then you really have a hard time seeing what's stars and what's not. Okay, the second thing is aperture, and basically the iris of your eye. And let me bring out, I'm going to bring myself back up. So, oops, let me go back. What I do is I have a preview window that I have to manipulate to bring over to you to see. Okay, so I'm going to bring myself up here, and I'm going to pull a lens. You can't see my mess right here, but I'm going to pull up a lens. And what this is a manual lens, and hopefully we can focus into it. Let me pull the cap off. And what we're looking at here is if I can get it to focus. Okay. Sorry, this is hard because I'm looking at trying to get a camera to focus here. We're looking at another lens. This is going to be pretty tough. Well, it's kind of tough to see where we can actually open up the aperture of this manual lens. If you can kind of see, we're going to open it wide open. Oh, there you go. Now you can see how it's wide open. And this is like your pupil of this lens. And you can actually see how it inverts the image of myself as it's looking through. So if I can, I'm trying to watch my screen as I bring this down. But each time I click it, you can see the iris or the aperture gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, you know what happens with your eye does the same thing. There we go. As I'm clicking it between the different aperture settings or f-stop. And think about it as if with your eye, when you have bright sunlight go into your eyes go very, very constricted. And so essentially it's trying to block as much light out of your eye or back of the sensor as it can. So ideally, shooting at night, we want it all the way open. So let me go back to our setting or our slides here. Now we can kind of relate what f-stop is, and that's the size of the iris. And let me go back over and change the next one. Okay, so the smaller the number, the larger the iris, so the f-stop. So if you look at your lenses, and what we're talking about, the point and shoots really are difficult to shoot than Milky Way or any type of star. So you kind of have to have either what's called a crop sensor camera or a full frame sensor. Let me pull this back off again, and I'm going to switch back again to me. And what I have here is a 5D Mark III, picked it up off of the Classifieds KSL. You get a used one. It's probably about a 5-year-old camera, but this is what's called a full frame camera. The sensor back there, you're looking at the mirror right now, but we can, if I turn it on, because this is a mirrorless, the mirror actually bounces the image of what you're seeing through your lens up onto the viewfinder. And if I go live view, it's going to flip that mirror up. And now we're looking at the sensor. And I don't know if I can give a picture of that, but basically I've exposed my whole sensor to all you guys, and then bring back the mirror. Um, Now, there's also a second type of camera, which is a crop sensor, and all it is a half. It's a 1.6, at least Canon is called a 1.6 times of a crop, so it's just a little bit smaller of a sensor. Those are kind of like your Canon Rebels, your consumer cameras that you'll find at, say, Costco, which aren't bad. The problem, we'll kind of go into that on the differences between the two. So let me go back to the smaller the number, the larger the iris or aperture or f-stop. Um, so you kind of can see here on this diagram over here. Again, another just reiterating, the greater the size of the aperture, the more light that will be hitting the sensor. So you saw where we opened it wide up, which was on that lens that I showed you was a 1.4. So it stopped down. Let me go back on this one. It stopped down to as wide as an f1.4. As I clicked it down, it went f2, 2.8, and a 4. So later we're going to go into my camera. I can show live settings of the camera that I'm using right here, and we'll talk about that. So there are problems with low f-stop. And if you've ever had your eyes dilated at the doctor, the eye doctor, you'll kind of get the idea. So when they go dilated, your aperture on your iris, let me come to back to myself here. So when your eyes get dilated, it's obviously allowing a lot of light, and the doctor gives you these temporary glasses, right? Because it's so bright, because you have your aperture set at an f1.4. But there's problems with that. If you ever looked out in the distance and you're having a hard time, you can focus on stuff, but everything else seems to be out of focus. And that is called the field of view. So let me go back here, and we're going to talk about the problems with, it's not really problems, because you can use that as an advantage on telling your story. If you saw our preview of Trisha as she did her last sign off of that video, I kicked that aperture way down to a 2.8, like saying here, and my depth of field, the focus area, the area that's focused. If you watched as she walked towards you as she was giving her last little spill on that, she stayed in focus and everything went out of focus into the background because I kept the depth of field really shallow. So the lower the f-stop, the really more shallower your field of view is going to be. And here's another example where you can kind of see when you bring that iris down to a pinpoint, everything in the image becomes all in focus. Now, when you're trying to shoot astrophotography, you want to let the most light in, right? So when you're trying to bring in the most light, you're going to want to shoot it at f1.4 on the very left. But that's a problem if you're trying to shoot, say, a Milky Way scape with some foreground, such as, say Antelope Island and some rocks up on Buffalo Point. So there's a couple things that you can do. You can bring that f-stop to the right a little bit to maybe an f2.8, and that sort of brings that stuff into focus. And that helps out. And some other people also will take two separate images, one of the night sky and the one of the rocks or the foreground, and then they blend them in Photoshop later as two images and make them as one, so they keep them in focus. And that's also called focus stacking. And so you can stack different, you can kind of layer your focus points all the way into an image, and everything looks all in focus. And so that's how they kind of do it. Some couple other problems with a low f-stop, and sometimes this is more lensing too, so it might be a little bit difficult to see, but if you look in the very top left corner of that picture, you'll see kind of almost like UFOs, and those are actually stars, and as you go to the center, they're a lot more pinpoint. That was because I was using the very lowest f-stop, and I think that was a 50 millimeter that I was using, and I forgot that vignette or coma shows up a little bit more prevalently when you're using that really low f-stop or low iris aperture size. And so sometimes people will back that off a little bit at two stops, but then you're losing a little bit of light, so you have to balance that, and you got to really find the balance in your camera what is good for you. And you'll start seeing that. You may not see that in the first couple of months of your images, and then you'll start looking in those corners and going, what is that? And sometimes it's just the lens. Some lenses just have worse coma than the others, and so you just have to pick a really good lens that doesn't have that. And sometimes it might be just renting one and see what works best for your camera. Okay, so the next one is exposure. So the time we're going to keep that shutter open. Um, Sorry, I was trying to look at the feed here to see if people have questions. And Tricia, if you see some questions, feel free to pipe up and hit me up as we go. So exposure is the time again that we keep the shutter open. So why not just leave it open all night long? Well, some people can do that, but the problem is we're trying to shoot a moving target. And when you have motion, you're going to get blurring. And that's where these trackers behind us, the trackers that's behind me, let me again, those that didn't see it, but the trackers that are behind us, that's how you capture stop that motion, that you can keep your exposure or the shutter open or your curtain open on your sensor long enough to keep it from blurring, from movement. And so these little mounts back here keep it locked onto the night sky, so you can do that. But there's also problems too. If you're trying to track the night sky and you're trying to catch the foreground, then that means your foreground's going to be blurry. So you're going to be doing that double stacking anyways. Okay, so here's more examples of the problems with these long exposures. So this is a photo that I took. This is Piper State Park on the California coast, just south of Monterey, California. I drove down there. I was down there on a vacation and put the girls to bed and drove down all pretty much all night. I never sleep on these trips. And shot this area. Beautiful, beautiful area. A lot of people shoot this area, but if you look very, very close, it was so dark there that I had to get the foreground, anything to show up, I had to let it sit for almost 3 minutes to pick that up. But that 3 minutes caused a lot of blurring in that background. Sometimes it does look cool, and maybe just to the untrained eye, it's like, wow. But once you start putting these things together, you'll see, oh, maybe I had left my curtain or my shutter open too long, that we have star blurring. There's some other problems in there too that we'll talk about. The next one that I want to talk about is, so we have the three things, and we're going to kind of come back and talk about the three things, and hopefully have some questions for me as we go along that. But the next thing is we got to find some dark places, because we know light pollution is a problem. The moon. Astronomers, I tell you, I hate the moon. It looks so cool, and I do some really cool pictures, but I am dead in the water when the moon's out. I mean, it's just, sometimes it's almost depressing, because some of the times the moonless nights are always cloudy and it's raining, and then the moon comes out and it's clear for 3 or 4 days, and I just can't shoot because the moon's out and it's causing too much of a glare in the atmosphere that I can't get that really cool shot of that Milky Way. Cars and airplanes, and now satellites. Boy, there's if you've ever heard of Elon Musk and SpaceX, this is I don't want to bash SpaceX, but they're supposed to be putting 40 something thousand satellites in the air, in the sky, which could and do come through your images. And so you're either going to have to edit them out or wait until they all pass. Sometimes that might be a little bit harder as it goes along in the future. A couple things that I also look at, I use apps to find out when the moon phases, and really, lately I've been really lazy, and I just ask Siri. Siri knows my moon phase. I don't know how she does, but she does. And so I just ask her, hey, when's new moon? New moon is when the moon is right with the sun, so that means we're not going to have any. And I think today or tomorrow is new moon, which is the best time to go shoot. But there's apps that'll tell you on what day, and so you can kind of plan your shoots accordingly. Say if you want to go on a vacation down into the dark skies of southern Utah and whatnot. So let's talk a little bit. This is kind of my commercial. Light pollution. What is it? This is a shot from Antelope Island, and you can see to the right is Salt Lake City. To the left is kind of the Layton, um, Syracuse, Hill Air Force Base area, you can kind of see that there's some light domes. And what's happening there is the light, the stray light, I'm going to call it stray light, light that's not really going anywhere other than straight up and not hitting the ground. And that excites. And tomorrow we're going to be talking to live stream with Paul Ricketts at the University of Utah Physics Center. He could probably tell a little bit more about how the physics and how that works with our atmosphere. But basically, it's just the lights bouncing and scattering, they call it, into the blue part of the spectrum. And as we get uh, if you watch a little bit the Saving the Dark on Saturday, they'll talk about how that blue spectrum is really, really bad for this, and we're seeing a lot of that starting up, and that's really is my main motivation on what I do here. I figure if I can get you to go out and touch the sky, then you may be concerned about it and maybe do something about it, and so that's really my mission. A really great site is Dark Sky or Dark Site Finder. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna actually go to that website. So I'm gonna stand by for a second. I'm gonna grab my desktop and send it over. So you're gonna see where this is how I'm transitioning on one side and then the other. So this is my desktop that you're seeing right here. But I'm gonna go to the actual web page here, the dark that we can kind of manipulate it around. And I want you to kind of pay attention to this little line right down the center, and that's pretty much where uh, I call it the wave of light pollution that's heading westward. Obviously, the west coasts are pretty bright, but these are the very, very bright places, and all these little spots here are dark sky parks. Now, not all of them are depicted here. I noticed. I mean, because we can scroll in here and kind of see Utah, and there's several. I think we're up to maybe 19. Helper was the last community down here that was certified, so that's not there. But this is a really good site to say, oh, well, maybe down here, kind of the Lake Powell area is super dark, probably most of the darkest places in the continental U.S. So let me kind of zoom back out here. Um, what I want to now focus on is the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. And this is from their website. Very, very cool. And I'm kind of taking a look at, zoomed up into a map here of Antelope Island because Antelope Island is a dark sky park, certified dark sky park, one of the 19. It is, I think what I call it, Trish, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a bronze level. It's a Bortle scale 4. We're going to talk about the Bortle scale as well a little bit later. But as we zoom out here, we can start seeing some things that are trending. So they have here that people, communities and folks that have shown interest on becoming dark sky. Here's an IDA applicant, and I think these purple areas are Jordanelle. We have Wasatch Mountain State Park. We have, I think, Echo or Rockport, and then East Canyon. So all these that are very, very close to us, they're going to be dark sky parks here very, very soon. And I was just up at East Canyon just a few days ago, and I think if you went to my Night Sky Science, you would see the beautiful image that I took. Just they have a couple wagons up there, just took that. But we want to still focus on Antelope Island. I love Antelope Island because it's very, very close. It's a 20-minute drive out, and you can be out shooting in 20 minutes. That's what's really, really nice about it. And they have that protection of the Great Salt Lake that kind of protects a lot of, kind of creates a light pollution free zone, if you will. But as we zoom out again and we start creeping into the Colorado Plateau, these folks are very, very good at what they do. And they've talked to all these communities down here in the Colorado Plateau. And if you look down here, all this interest, they want to keep it dark. And we have, here's all our dark sky parks. So, let's see, I think we have over here is Arches, we have Canyonlands. This area right here is the application. That's at the Lake Powell area, but I don't know if, is that the Grand Staircase or something? Some of these I just don't know. Over here, Trish, do you know what this one is over here, the green? Yeah, I think you might be seeing a little bit of lag, so you might not be able to see the whole thing. But anyway, but you can kind of.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. But you can kind of get the importance of this dark sky cooperative. It goes down into the Grand Canyon and down into Arizona. And as soon as they started getting some success over here, Great Basin National Park over here, um, decided, hey, that's a great idea. We're going to be the Great Basin Dark Sky Cooperative, and now they've teamed up. What an amazing thing that we have just in our backyard. And what, maybe a 2 hour drive, and you're over here. The UN is a fantastic area for dark skies, and all these communities right here making an effort uh, to do that. Right here, this green dot right here is our latest dark sky community, and that's Helper. Very, very cool. They did a lot of work to do that, and it's really neat to read up and about that. Okay, let's go back now. I'm going to transition you back to my presentation. I went through the dark sky site finder. Um, I kind of like, here's my little plug again, the Utah Dark Skies. We actually have the most, and this slide is actually wrong. We're up to 19, so I keep having to change it because Utah is doing so good, but Utah is leading. We have the most dark sky parks in the world. Very, very cool. And again, just some darksky.org, some areas of, that's where you can see the latest certified dark sky parks that are around the area. And so I just kind of put that up there. The next one is the Bordeaux scale. So this is the light and darkness level. So when people say, how dark is your skies? They'll usually give you in this scale. So 8 and 9 is New York City. 7 is Salt Lake. Salt Lake is a pretty bright one. So it's very, very hard. And if you looked up, you maybe only see a couple dozen stars, and that's about it. What's really neat about Antelope Island is it's a Bordeaux 4. So if you compare the photos, and we'll kind of work on one in just a moment, and you'll kind of see, yeah, it kind of does look like a Bordeaux 4. And later on, and I think Trish, you'll probably talk about that. I don't know if Wendy talked about how she measures that, but that's kind of an interesting subject as well. Okay, moving on. So again, light pollution, I'm going to just harp on that, is our enemy. I mean, it's your enemy to your photography. And so the easiest solution is essentially don't let that light stray up into the sky. So it excites that blue and scatters the blue like you see blue during the day. If you go to the very right, that's a perfect light. You're shining it straight down. It's out of a driver's eyes, it's out of a neighbor's window, and certainly it's out of the night sky. That's what's really, really important here. And if I can tell you, if everybody did that along the Wasatch Front, you would have a brilliant, most likely a Bordeaux scale. Let's go back to that Bordeaux scale. I would tell you, you'd probably have a Bordeaux scale at least 3 in downtown here on the Wasatch Front. If everybody did that, a Bordeaux scale 3. If you go to Tucson, Arizona, and Flagstaff, those two communities are very, very. They're working very, very hard on that kind of stuff. Okay, so next thing we need to do is we need to understand the night sky. It can be very, very confusing. And yesterday, Wendy showed you Stellarium. I use Stellarium quite a bit because I want to know what's going to be in the night sky that I can shoot. It changes with seasons. Here's the exact same chart, right to left. The left being the winter time. We're looking out away from the center of the core of our galaxy out into deep space, if you will, in the wintertime. That's where you'll see Orion Nebula, and that's one of my favorite nebulas to shoot. And if you come out to Antelope Island, when we do a deep sky photography class, I'll let you connect to these trackers, and we can take long, long exposures of these and actually pick up Orion and the nebula and stuff, and it blows people's minds. And it still blows my mind every time I look at it. And then to the right, we're looking deep. So during the summertime, and it's coming up right now. You look deep right into that is the core of our Milky Way. There's supposedly a big fat black hole in there holding all of us together. It's hard to see because all that black inside of that is all dust that's blocking most of the light and most of what we see. And you see all that dust in some of these images that I take and post. The Needle Galaxy is one thing it's a sideways view, and you can see darkness along right through the middle of it. It's just dust particles and dirt, and basically that's what we are. We don't emit light, and so we're part of that dirt and dust, and so it's planets and all that good stuff that's floating around out there. And again, Paul can probably go a little bit more into detail about that, but just to let you know, we do see two different skies. Well, essentially, if you went summer to winter, you're going to see two different things. So let's see if I can get this to play. We're going to show the rotation around Polaris or the North Star and show how let me go back. Let me see if I can get this going. Okay, so what we're looking at here, hopefully it's clear enough on your screen, but we're looking at a time lapse of the visitor center at Antelope Island as I'm shooting north, just to give an idea of how the Earth rotates. If you look really close, Andromeda Galaxy is visible in there, and this is with a very, very wide lens and a pretty low settings. If you, I really wasn't trying hard to pick up the Milky Way there, looking out away from the core. But still, you have a pretty good chance of picking up Andromeda Galaxy in most of your images that you work. And let me see if I can get past this. Okay, so helpful sky applications. Okay, so I use a lot of apps. I mean, like I said, I use Siri to find out when is the moon going to come out. And as a matter of fact, let's try it. I don't know if Siri will even help us out because it's pretty funny. Siri, when is new moon? She's thinking.
The nearest new moon will be at 8:25 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020.
She is so smart. Perfect. That's all you need to know. New moon's coming up. That's a perfect time to go out and shoot because the moon's traveling with the sun and it's not going to obliterate your sky. And so I like to use, Siri. This is a really, really helpful one. This is an app, and it's kind of an expensive one, PhotoPills. If most photographers will have that on their phone, and you can kind of slide yourself around into this app and kind of see if you look there, you can kind of see where the sun comes up. So this is in the morning. It'll show you where the sun rises. If you want to take a picture of the moon rising over a certain point of a mountain, sometimes you can figure that out by the blue point where the moon comes up. You can also see where it's going to set. So that's how you find a lot of photos that they zoom into the moon rising right perfectly up a street or up an alley, and they use PhotoPills to determine where that's going to be. Pretty cool. Stellarium, we saw Wendy work with Stellarium, and I use it all the time to find out, oh, okay. Stellarium is really, really unique because you can put in your lens values or your focal length, how zoomed in. So that's what focal length is how zoomed in you are going to be with the sky, and kind of give you an idea of what my lens is going to look like with this part of the sky. So you can kind of dig around Stellarium and figure that out. Sky Guide, I don't use this as much anymore. I kind of have gone to Sky Safari Pro because it links up with my telescope a little bit better because I can link to it up with Wi-Fi, and so I can just kind of slew where I want to go. But Sky Guide is still a really, really good one for what we're talking about today is what wide field photography. It's grabbing that whole big piece of the Milky Way. So, okay, some things that you really need when you go out for a night sky shoot. You need a tripod. You really do. You got to be so still for so long because you're going to be shooting in, 30 seconds at times, and one little bump is going to mess up your image. A remote shutter. Believe it or not, I went out shooting last night, and I wanted to take the least amount of stuff with me, and I actually used the 2-second delay on my shutter, so I can pull the trigger, let go of the camera, it gets this little wiggle wobble, and then it kind of stabilizes out just about 2 seconds, and then it takes the shot. So that kind of allows you that if you forgot your shutter remote or you just are too lazy like me and you don't want to bring it and connect it, you can use that 2-second delay on the menu. You really need to grab some wide angle lenses. Really, the lens that I was showing you is the 24 millimeter. Excuse me. And then also a 14 millimeter. I love the 14. What I have here, and let me bring myself out here and I will show you the difference between the 14 millimeter and a 24 millimeter. Where are we? I'm just trying to see on the times here. But you can kind of see, if I can get it to focus here, the size of these lenses. So down here at the bottom is my 14 millimeter, huge, and it's heavy. And then you have the 24. But what I want you to notice is look how big these lenses are. I have a lot of people say, oh, well, can we not take a picture of the Milky Way with our iPhone? Well, they're starting to bring out the technology, and what they're doing is they're really using, I believe, the ISO, and they're kind of cranking it up. But if you think about the surface area that you're trying to capture um, light and how much surface area that this 14 millimeter has to capture the amount of light versus this little itsy bitsy tiny camera in your iPhone. Just not a lot of light to be picking up. I mean, think about it. If compare your eyes and see a cat eye or an owl eye. So much more light available for an owl because their eyes are so big, and that's why they see better than us at night. We were not built to have very good night vision, unfortunately. And a lot of people will ask me, um, I'll take this Milky Way shot, and they'll say, "Does it really look like that?" Well, actually, it doesn't. The reason why that's not the case is because these sensors and these cameras are so much better than what our eyes can see at night. We really go into at night. If you really pay attention, you really see black and white, and so. Yeah, I kind of have to tell them, you're going to go out there and with your eyeballs, you have to look at the sky and touch the sky in a different way than you do with a camera. Whole different experience. And so, yeah, a lot of people get some people say, no, that's not real. Well, it is. It's just our eyes are pathetic. Okay, back to what we need. The wide angle lens. Okay, manual mode. The dreaded manual mode. And hopefully everybody knows how to get into their manual mode. It's typically an M. That's going to give you the ability to work the aperture, the exposure, and the ISO, the sensitivity. ISO, I want you to go as low as you can go. Go as low as you can go. Without seeing noise. You're going to have to experiment with your camera because every camera sensor is different. And so you want to keep that noise level to the lowest that you can have it. Just kind of some general areas is maybe a 32 to 6400 ISO is kind of where I work with mine with the Canon 5D. And I've only shot Canon, so that's all I really know. But Nikon and Sony, they're really good at it too. So you just kind of know your cameras so you can control all three of those things. Because the camera at night cannot detect anything and do any auto stuff. We're going to have to manual focus as well. Manual focus can be difficult for a lot of people, but if you have a live view in your camera, what you can do is zoom in. So find a bright star, zoom in on it, and then use your focus ring and make sure you switch to manual focus so the autofocus doesn't try to grab it. And what you're trying to do is you're supposed to go back and forth on your focus until the star is the smallest you can get it. And then what I want you to do is take a look at, let me transition back and hopefully I can show you a couple things here. So right here, sorry, I have a hard time. You have, let me see if it'll pick it up. Come on. I have the autofocus on. If it's kind of difficult to see, but if you look on your camera lenses, you're going to have a kind of a figure 8 line. And as you move your focus around, figure 8 right there means, I apologize, it keeps not focusing right on it. What that means is it's called infinity. And usually your best focus for the stars and very, very far out is going to be very, very close to this mark where the infinity line is, the little figure 8 there. So once you get your star focused in manual, take a look and see where you're at near infinity and kind of make a mental note on where that is relative to the setting on your lens. You're going to really, really know what those settings are when you get done with this, when you start finishing up with this, astrophotography. Like I said, now I can look at, say, this lens. I know this has a different infinity. Let me see if I can bring it out and bring it up on the screen. If you can see that, the squiggly line, I have to put that line right in between the two figure 8s, right in the squeeze part, I guess, if you will. And that's the infinity for this lens. And each lens is going to be different on how they display. And that was a Sigma 1.8 14 millimeter. Great lens. The next one, let's see, we want to shoot in RAW. You can't shoot in JPEG. Think of JPEG as that's like a print. You do not want to shoot that way. That's your finished product as you send it out in JPEG. You always want to shoot in RAW because we're going to manipulate that quite a bit in our Photoshop or our other applications that we manipulate our photos with. That gives you kind of the widest range of moving that data around. And we'll try to go into that on Thursday on how to process those images a little bit in detail. The next one, turn off your in-camera noise reduction. You don't want your camera to reduce the noise because you can do that in post-processing or in your Photoshop. So turn that off. You want everything manual. You just want to get the raw picture and don't have a Canon or Nikon do the work for you because you're going to do that at home. White balance, that's up to you because you can change the white balance in post-processing too, and that's a little slider, and we can show you that. I have here is a headlamp. Let me see if I have it. Let me transition here so you can see me. I love this headlamp. There's a couple of them out there. This will turn on, has red. Well, I don't like the flash, but once you get on red, you can also turn it on white, give it a bright one. So lots of different features, but the key is red because you don't want to, at night, you don't want to ruin your night vision by looking at a big white light because it takes your eyes just a little bit more to adapt. Okay, let's see where we're at. Things to consider.
Ryan.
How we doing, Trish?
Good. Couple questions.
Okay.
You asked earlier, where do you get that fancy light? Where do you find those fancy headlamps with the red and blue lights?
You know, unfortunately, it's Amazon.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a couple of them out there. If you go into some forums and whatnot, there's, let's see. Yeah, you know, I just go into look up red headlamp in Amazon, and then I read the reviews of them. But I really like the this Petzl really works out really well. And I have another one, but they seem to disappear. I don't know if I lose them out there in the out in the wilderness. So if you do find a headlamp, it's mine. I lost it. Anyway.
And one more question, Ryan. How well does a fisheye lens work for astrophotography?
It's great. Okay, so think about this is your art. This is really is your way to touch it. So the bigger field of view, the more you're going to see. Now you may not see as much detail, but yeah, fisheye is great too. I haven't used them much. I don't like the warpingness of it. That's just my opinion. But whatever you want to do, this is your stuff. You know, this is your way of touching the sky, and I'm just trying to give you the tools on how to touch the sky with a camera. Some people do it with a telescope. Some people do it with binoculars, you know, and a lot of people just go out, lay in the back of a lawn chair and look up. That's the best way too. And so it just depends on what you prefer to have your photos look like and tell your story. You're trying to tell a story through this lens. Did that answer the question, you think?
It did for me. Thank you.
Anything else so far?
No, I think we're in good shape.
Okay, so some things to consider. Let me tell you. Bundle up. I don't know. Boy, I freeze every time. And I think I'm going to pack. I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to pack. So last night, I packed long johns. I packed, my coat. And I probably, since it's really kind of getting warmer, you know, I finally thought that I was warm. But I tell you, when I come to bed, I'm just frozen every time. So please, please, please. Fingerless gloves are really, really nice to have because you can manipulate the weather. I want to go back to my desktop. One good thing, let me transition you here, and then let's go back to one thing I didn't show you is this satellite. So this is live. This is what's happening right now. And so if you guys have an opportunity tonight is really a fantastic night because you look at this big hole in the clouds, and Siri told us new moon is tomorrow, so the moon does not come up and the Milky Way will rise at about 1-ish to 2-ish. So I was out probably about 3 a.m., 4 a.m. getting my best shots last night. But I don't anticipate this hole, you know, this is probably going to be your opportunity tonight. So those of you that are going to be entering that photo contest, tonight would be the night to go out. And I think, Trish, your gate closes at 10, right?
That's right. Yeah, 10 o'clock.
Okay. So back to here. So we'll try to hurry up and get done so you can zip out there. But the thing is you got to stay out there until probably 3 or 4. So go out there and camp, get a campsite, and stay out there for the night. And so you can get the Milky Way because that's just when it's coming out right now. When we really go digging out into the sky in the Milky Way for out at Antelope Island, it's typically late in the summer where it's kind of a decent time to go out. Let's see. The humidity can affect it too. The more humidity out there could fog your lenses. Sometimes I get them even frosting if you're really cold. So think about too. Some people put a hand warmer in a sock and just put it around the lens, and that helps it from frosting over. Just be kind of creative on trying to keep that thing warm. The lens part, not the camera, because the camera needs to stay cool for the noise. Of course, food and water. Your bug spray. So the no-see-ums out there at Antelope Island, and Trish she knows a lot more about them because she's in them every day. Um, but I noticed the no-see-ums, those are the little biting flies. They go away. As soon as that sun goes down, they are gone. But the thing is, the mosquitoes come out. And so the bug spray is for the mosquitoes. And they don't do anything to the no-see-ums. They burst right through that stuff. So that your bug spray. And don't get the bug spray on your lenses. That is bad for your lenses. So try to be very careful not to get that DEET onto your lenses. Other night photographers, boy, I've been running around in the middle of Joshua Tree thinking I was by myself at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and all of a sudden I almost stepped on a guy because we were trying to shoot this little arch and whatnot. So maybe do a little hello, anybody out here? Sometimes you're going to meet them. And if you can, team up. So you're shooting kind of the same thing and whatnot. Dim your LCD display so you're not ruining your night vision, and then level your camera. Leveling is a big thing too. And so a lot of cameras have internal levelers that you want to put in the display. So because sometimes you just can't see. Okay, the last thing I think really is the technical part is the 500 rule. Now this is lens stuff. This is how long can you keep that lens open before you start seeing blur, and we call it the 500 rule. So for a full frame, if you have a full frame sensor, and so you need to find out whether your camera is the big sensor or the smaller crop sensor. You need to apply this rule a little bit differently, and you can YouTube on how to do this. But essentially, we're going to take the lens focal length. So I had a 14 millimeter there. We take the 500, divide that by 14. I'm going to bring that up. So 500 divided by 14 gives me 35 seconds to keep that open before you start seeing. I don't like it being open for 35 seconds. So let's go over that again. So if you have a 24, if you're shooting at 24 millimeters, take 500 divided by 24. Let me pull up my calculator again. So 500 divided by 24, that comes with a 20.8. So about 20 seconds you can keep that shutter open until you start seeing movement, or they call it star trailing. I know I'm going to whip through this 500 rule really fast. But if you have a crop sensor, Nikon is a 1.5. You have to times it. Let's see, take that number that you came up with, so 20 seconds on a 24 millimeter, and then you have to divide that by 1.5. So that even is going to shorten the time by a half on how long you can keep that open. And the reason why is because that crop sensor is almost zooming in on your object that you're trying to shoot. It gives you that 1.5 times zoom factor. At least it's thinking that's a factor. Your lens doesn't change. It's just the image sensor is only seeing the dead center of what that lens light is displaying on the back of the camera, and so you have to add that in. Some typical ISO settings that I have. So if you're going to shoot your aperture at 2.8, I use the 64 because it's a little bit closed up. I shot last night at 2.8 and 32, and it actually looks really good. And we'll go into that on Thursday. F2, I use a 32 and then 16. But the lower, the better. The lower you're going to have to just trial and error it, find out what's best for your camera. Okay. I'm going to go just briefly on lighting your foreground. I'm going away from lighting your foreground, but a good website is lowlevellighting.com by Royce Bear. He's a pretty famous night photographer here in Utah. A great website. Talks about how low-level lighting is a little bit less intrusive. You don't have to remember where you put your flashlight because I had to light up as you're taking that long exposure. So I'm going to kind of I'm going to buzz through this pretty fast, but I would suggest on the left side, try out low-level lighting, and I think it is lowlevellighting.com. by Royce Bear. Great, 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 great information. He has a lot of loads and loads of information for you. And this is just some real quick why we use low level lighting, and I'm gonna leave that up to you to go to Royce's website and learn what low level lighting is. And because I think I'm now tending to look towards uh, the natural sky. Trust your histogram. If anybody knows what a histogram, now this is out of Royce's book, and I'm gonna, so I don't get sued by Royce, I'm gonna bring up my desktop again, and we're gonna go into my camera that you can see here, and then okay. So this is a live feed from my camera. I have this little live thing here from my camera, and these settings that are over here. So hopefully there's a bunch of all this stuff isn't distracting. But you can kind of see what my camera is currently set at. I'm using a 70 to 200, or no, 24 to 70 lens that's on there. Right here is an f.9. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manipulate this a little bit. And right over here to the right is the histogram. What that is telling us how much light, where it is. So to the left of your histogram is black. To the right is white. So I have more black because of my black shirt. So if I can strip here, but the more I bring the white out, the more that black kind of goes down and up. Can you see how as I move more black into the frame, the black moves up? Can you see that? Can you see that, Trish, over to that right side as the histogram is going live?
Yeah, I can't see it, Ryan.
Yeah, so that will show, you can actually bring that up in your camera, and you really want to take a look at that and make sure that you have a mountain, if you will, that curves off at the end of the right, and then also curves off especially to the end of the black. Now if it doesn't touch the bottom, that means you're underexposing. So let's go ahead and change some settings here, and let's underexpose a little bit my camera. I'm going to bring my ISO, the sensitivity. Can you see, if you look at the histogram, we're shifting more to the left. All that data is being, now can you see there's some cutoff that's happening down here into the lower, well, let me go this way. The lower right, you can see the black on the left side is being cut off. That's saying, hey, you're underexposed. You got too much black in there. And all I did is I changed the sensitivity of the sense. Now, I don't want you to do this. I want you to find a good noiseless ISO setting, and we're going to change the other two things, the time that it's going to stay, the shutters open, and the f-stop, the iris. So let's open up just the iris a little bit and see what happens. We'll go all the way up to as wide open as it can get. Bam! We opened up that, and you can't see it, but I watched the iris just open up on the camera. So if that's the case, oh, I can bring down my ISO, which the lower the ISO, the better for your image, the less noisy. And then here's the time the shutter is going to be open. So if we're going to go, say 1 second, the shutter is going to be up. This is going to simulate what it's going to be like. Oh, 1 second is going to be way overexposed. Did you see the histogram to the right shifted completely to the right? That means all your data, you got way too much right. And so learn about the histogram and learn what it's telling you in this. Let's go back so I'm not all blown out. Oh, a little bit too much. And even harder trying to focus here. So, okay. All right. So let's go back. Hopefully I'm not taking up too much of the time here. So trust your histogram. Take a look at it. You can look at it in the back of your camera and see where you're at. Make sure you're capturing all your data. The post-processor, we're going to talk about that on Thursday. So the popular ones, Photoshop, that's what I use. It's a subscription. But you have some free stuff out there. I'm not that good at, I tried them. I just wasn't getting the results that I like. So Raw Therapy and GIMP is a couple of them. I think there's several more that are out there. And there's just some pre-processed and post. This now is illegal at Arches. That's called light. I'd used low-level lighting. They don't want you to turn on any lights at all, so it has to be completely natural. And that can be done too in different techniques. So last thing I want to talk about is what drives us. And it's about you personally touching the sky. Now you can go to a library and look at a Hubble image and probably will never ever be able to take pictures of a Hubble quality image, but you can take a good picture. And I have this line here. I want you to think about if you went to, say, the zoo, and I think they do have one of these mountain lions, and you took a picture of the zoo, do you really expect you're going to go viral on Facebook? Probably not, because it's the zoo. However, if you see that cat walk down your street in downtown Layton, certainly that's going to go viral. That's what I mean by touching us. You're going to touch that sky yourself, and that's what brings meaning. Get that night sky out of the zoo, out of the library, out of Hubble, and into your hands. So just to wrap things up, a couple helpful websites. And this is more for deep sky astrophotography, but they have some good background. That's Astro Backyard. Dylan O'Donnell, he's down in the southern hemisphere, so he has a lot of southern hemisphere stuff that he looks at. And then Chuck's Astrophotography. So Trevor Astro Backyard is from he's from Canada, I think Toronto area. Chuck is just a little bit south in Detroit, and I've talked with Chuck several times as I travel around. Very, very great people to follow under YouTube. YouTube is your friend for all this stuff. And then last thing, use your talent to bring awareness to the night sky. Tell people about it. Teach people what you've learned. That's what's neat about astrophotography. And let me come back to me. That's what's neat about astrophotography. Astrophotographers are really, really unique. They share everything. They like to teach, and they usually will leave all the information um, about what their settings are. You go to other different, portraits and landscapes. Sometimes some photographers are really stingy on how they got that shot. But what's neat about astrophotography, they've touched something I think special, and they want to share that. And so you really can find a lot of good information out there. Thank you so much for taking this class, and hopefully you can get out there and touch the sky for yourself. Feel free to give me, if you have a question, nightsky@gmail.com. Send me it over, and I'll get back with you and hopefully help you out with your questions. Let me go back and make sure I can go back to both of us. There we go. And let me
Hello.
transition it. And I will turn the time back over to Trish. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And if we have some questions, I guess we can go over that.
Yeah, we had one more question that I wanted to answer. Let me find it so that I don't botch it. How did the park get dark sky status when it was so close to a major metropolitan area? Great question.
Yeah.
Our assistant manager, Wendy Wilson, that you may have met last night at the Star Hopping live show, worked her tail off. We made a lot of modifications to the lighting on our park, changed out all the fixtures, made the lights that we did keep more of an orange or an amber glow instead of those blue lights that really blind us from the night sky. So we made a lot of changes to our lighting, and we worked with the help of Ryan too, with the community around us, talking to city leaders about their lighting and what they could do to help us really experience a great night sky. So it was a lot of work. Bless Wendy, she's tough. she had a goal and she achieved it. So we're very grateful. A couple other questions. The gate closure, I wanted to touch on. The gate does close at 10 p.m. We won't lock you in. So just make sure you're out and through that entrance gate before 10 o'clock and stay as long as you want. Come out. We have a meteor shower this week, I believe. It's peaking tomorrow. So come out and shoot that and just leave anytime. The gate will be closed, but as you approach it with your car, it'll pop open for you.
Watch the weather, because I think the weather is going to be a little bit rough, possibly. I know tonight really is early in the morning. I mean, I should say this, Trish. You could visit the sister East Canyon State Park has some really dark skies too. So, about 3 a.m. if you go up there and it's beautiful as long as there's no clouds. So if you can't get into Antelope Island, past the gate time, you can at least get just outside the park on the highway there, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. We are having a contest as part of this Dark Sky Week celebration. We're doing an astrophotography contest. So get out there tonight, look up, take some good shots using the stuff that Brian taught us, and shoot those images over to my email. It's T like Trish, Ackley, ACKLEY @utah.gov. I'll put it in the comments. I've got some fun prizes. So get after that. That's running all week long. Bugs. We have bugs. There's no getting away from it. So we're kind of known for our biting gnats. They're really, really tough this time of year. Great news for astrophotographers like us, they do go away when the sun sets. So do bring out some insect repellent for the mosquitoes because those will come out in the evening when you're trying to shoot. But the biting gnats that are really miserable for folks that visit during the day will be gone. So don't worry about those. And lastly, just look up. Get outside, even in your own driveway. If you look up at the sky, if you aren't thrilled, if you're disappointed at the number of skies and the quality of night that you're seeing, look around at your lighting. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your city leaders, and see what you can do to bring out the Milky Way in your own driveway. Because it's possible. We did it. It's possible. That's all I've got. Let me make sure that we don't have any more questions, Ryan.
Okay.
And we have folks from, gosh, we've got Pennsylvania. I have Texas, Washington State. We have
Wow.
folks from everywhere. So yeah, use some of those resources that Ryan touched on earlier to find some dark places near you to go outside and get some good looks.
I've traveled a lot of places, and I tell you, Utah really rocks. Um,
Yeah.
really, really rocks. We are really, really blessed with what we have, and hopefully we can make an effort to protect it. And I think really the park system are taking the lead in helping us out to do that.
Okay, Jim, Ryan, Jim is asking, first of all, thanks for the invite this morning. Regarding the manual focus, you might have mentioned it, and if so, I apologize. But with live view, can you magnify the image to 10 to assist the focus?
Let's see, the EOS R. I don't. Ooh, I think I can only go 5 times. I was trying it last night. That's a good question. But I talked to Jim. I think this is Jim from Canon. Um, that we were talking about the EOS R about. I don't know how to
I
do it,
want
so maybe he would have the better idea on how to get it closer to that. What I've really kind of noticed is I kind of know the setting. I use that infinity on my lens and can know exactly where I need to be, and it always usually matches up where it needs to be.
to, awesome. Just loads of gratitude, and people are very grateful, as am I, Ryan. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so much. No, this
spending
is
your
my
evening with
pleasure.
us.
I love it. I love sharing it, and I love to see the pictures that you guys send out. I mean, that's what I live for. So, I really want to see your stuff, and so does Antelope Island. We want to see what you can do. It's beautiful out there.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, if no more questions, I will say goodnight, and we have fun things happening all week. So check us out tomorrow night at 7:30.
Okay, sounds good. And then I will be back on. We're going to go a little bit deeper on Thursday. So Thursday we're going to go into photoshopping and we're going to talk about equatorial mounts and all that good stuff and go really
Oh,
really
good,
deep. Yeah. So
good, good, good.
join us same time 7:30 Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, thank you everybody. Thank you and get shooting out there.
Great. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye bye.